Grassroots is brought to you by Work It, meeting the needs of entrepreneurs in Stillwater since 2017. Welcome to Grassroots, a podcast series for growing civic engagement through conversation. I'm Chris Peters.
And I'm Michelle Charles, and we're your hosts for this series.
So Michelle, why are we doing this?
Well, Chris, we believe that when it comes to public life, people tend to talk at each other or about each other way more than they talk to each other. And we wanted to create a place that encourages more meaningful conversations.
Yeah, I don't know about you, but I'm a little tired of soundbite politics.
I think we all are. So for the races we're talking about in this series, Election Day is February 8th. Early voting will begin February 3rd. On this ballot, voters in Stillwater are going to be asked to choose the next mayor and to decide a couple of propositions. One that would increase a dedicated sales tax for transportation, and one that would increase the city's visitor tax.
To kick off this series, we have interviews with Marc Trotter and Will Joyce, candidates for Mayor of Stillwater. Each interview will be split into 3 episodes, where we get to know the candidates as humans, learn about their interests, how they spend their free time, and hear why they want to serve their community. Each part will be released simultaneously, so be sure to listen to each candidate's episode.
In part 1, we get to know Stillwater's Mayor Will Joyce, learn about his life growing up in Stillwater, what brought him back, and how he balances family, work, and public service. Hello, welcome to Grassroots, a podcast to grow civic engagement. I'm Michelle Charles.
And I'm Chris Peters.
And we're here today with Stillwater Mayor Will Joyce and mayoral candidate, I might add, to talk about the upcoming election and why Will wants to do this thing. Mm-hmm. So welcome, Will. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Mm-hmm. Thanks for coming. We kind of want to start at the very beginning, you know.
Beginning?
Yeah. How did you come into this world?
What is your first memory?
I mean, a lot of us, you know, we've kind of already know some things. Mm-hmm. But for people that have no clue, where were you born? Where were you raised?
Sure.
Where's your family from?
That's it's funny because my parents were just in town this weekend. My dad and I were driving around. Where were we going? We were going to the honor band concert this Saturday, and we drove past Married Student Housing, which was the first place I lived in Stillwater.
Okay.
So it's not called Married Student Housing anymore. I think they call it family housing or something along those lines. But I came to Stillwater in 1981 when I was 2. My parents, who were both Army veterans, so my parents both joined the Army right out of high school.
Wow.
My dad from Oklahoma, my mom from New Hampshire, and they met up in Germany in the Army in the early 70s. And so they spent 3 years in Germany in the Army and met each other and got married and moved back to Oklahoma. My dad worked as a diesel mechanic in Tulsa for several years. My brother and I were both born in Tulsa. And then in 1981, he decided to go back to school, came to OSU on the GI Bill as a Army vet, my mom and my dad both. And we moved into 40-5 South University Place, which is still there.
It's still there. Wow.
Still there, right next to the Cowgirl Soccer Stadium.
Okay.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah, so that was my first address in Stillwater, and spent 2 or 3 years there while my dad was getting an engineering degree here at OSU. And went to Westwood growing up and lived on campus, and it was great. It was really a cool place to grow up as a kid.
What did your mom study? You said she came back?
She studied initially, I think, computer science. She was a computer engineer in the Army,
okay.
But she ended up not finishing right away at that point. So she stayed home and was a stay-at-home mom for us. And my little sister was born in 1984. So she ended up staying home and then went back to college and got a nutrition degree at OSU. I want to say I was in junior high, I think, when she graduated.
Okay, cool. Okay.
So is it just the two of you and your sister?
No, I have an older brother.
Oh,
so
okay.
my older brother and I, he's 2 years older. My sister's almost 5 or 6 years younger. We all grew up here in Stillwater, all went to Westwood and graduated from Stillwater High.
So Will's a middle child.
I am.
Yes.
That's supposed to say something about you.
I don't know.
I'm a peacemaker.
Ah.
That's the
Okay.
you got to be the one that's solving all the arguments and keeping the peace.
Okay, so
that might be useful in the future.
I was wondering if that actually, plays into working as mayor.
I think it does. I don't know how much of I tie to being a middle child and that sort of thing, but I think from a personality standpoint, I don't seek out conflict. I'm not the kind of guy who likes to get into fights, but I do. I am an arguer. I like to discuss things and have a discussion and talk things through, but always towards an end of getting to a point where everybody's on the same page and trying to get people, in a common frame of mind and to look at things in a similar standpoint, or at least to see an issue from both sides so that we can move forward together. I think that's certainly part of my personality and something that has been helpful and useful to me in this job.
You obviously went to school to become a lawyer.
I did.
Were there any things like maybe the middle child, maybe growing up that like, this is what I want to do with my life?
It's funny. So I went to Stillwater High, went to OSU, graduated from OSU in 2001 with an English degree, actually with an emphasis in film. So the literature I studied as an English major at OSU was film.
Okay.
And I'd always planned to go to law school. I actually started OSU as an engineering student. I was a chemical engineering student my first semester or so, first year. I was a science and math kid in high school, and that was kind of the idea. And then I realized I wasn't that big of a science and math kid. I enjoyed it and I was okay at it, but it just wasn't something I wanted to take more electives, right? When you get into an engineering program at OSU, you start to look at the flow chart and there's like 4 electives in 4 years, and I wanted to take history and political science and philosophy and different sorts of things. And so I went as far you could go the other direction, which is an English degree where you have like 50 hours of electives you get to take as part of the program. So I took all kinds of stuff in college, but I had planned to go to law school all along. But I will say I never really wanted to be a lawyer. I didn't like being a lawyer wasn't ever I didn't like grow up watching legal shows and wanted to be the guy in the courtroom making these arguments. I think from a standpoint of an academic perspective, I love school. I like learning. I like reading. I think law school appealed to me from that standpoint as something that was challenging, was going to give me a lot of different opportunities. It wasn't necessarily just going to be, litigating or being that kind of a lawyer. And that's really what drew me to it.
So have you always focused then on corporate law?
When I first got out of law school, I worked at a big law firm in St. Louis, and I did litigation. I did mostly, business litigation. I've tried landlord-tenant cases. I've tried breach of contract cases. So mostly business focused. I was never in criminal law or anything like that, but I also did zoning work in St. Louis. I've done sort of estate planning and kind of closely held business planning as an attorney in my sort of first career.
Well, let's talk a little bit about your family, your wife and kids and everything.
So my wife's name's Rochelle. She's also a Stillwater kid. We actually started dating when we were 16 in Stillwater High School as sophomores. And so we've been together for 25-ish years. So 95, I think, was when we started dating. We got married after our junior year of college. So we both stayed here, went to OSU, got married before our senior year. Lived over on 6th Street our senior year, the apartment building that's been since torn down, not there anymore. But and then we moved together to St. Louis after we graduated. My wife went to graduate school at St. Louis University as a speech pathologist. So she has a master's degree in speech pathology from SLU, and I went to Washington University in St. Louis for law school. So schools are about 6 or 8 miles apart in St. Louis. It was a good fit for both of us. We kind of looked around the country to try to find where we could both go, to programs that we were both interested in and a place we wanted to live. My first choice was New York City. I wanted to go to NYU, but Rochelle was not super excited about New York. We looked at like Duke in North Carolina. We looked at USC and UCLA. But St. Louis was really a good fit for us because they were both good schools and good programs, close enough to family that we could drive down for the weekend, but far enough away from family that mom and dad weren't just going to show up, any random Tuesday afternoon. So
Nice.
Which, as a young couple was something that we were looking for, because we had both of our parents lived here in Stillwater when we got married. We spent the first year of our marriage eating Sunday dinner at both houses. We'd have lunch after church, and then we'd go to dinner at the other.
Yeah.
And I think we both put on about 30 pounds that first year of our marriage, just because we were eating all the time. But so yeah, we moved to St. Louis. Both went to graduate school there, and then we had our first kid in 2005. Jackson is our oldest, and ended up having 3 more while we were in St. Louis. So we have four kids, 3 boys, Jackson, Thomas, and Henry, and then our baby girl is Isabel. And they were all born in St. Louis while I was working in St. Louis. My wife worked for the first couple of years after she was out of school at a school for deaf children that have cochlear implants. So it was a very specialized school in St. Louis for cochlear implant recipients, and really a cool place. But she worked there for a couple of years until we had our first son, and then she worked from home after that, or she worked at home as a stay-at-home mom.
Sure. So what made you decide to come back to Stillwater? At what point?
So I wanted to come back to Stillwater. When we first moved to St. Louis, the idea was we'll go there for school and then we'll come back home. I had clerked, actually, after my second year of law school. I worked in Oklahoma City and Tulsa for the summer at 2 different law firms, thinking, we were going to come back here after law school. We just decided not to. Kind of after that summer, we got back to St. Louis, and we had made a lot of good friends there. We had become part of a church that we really liked, and we kind of thought, we like it here. We kind of want to stay, and so we decided to look for jobs in St. Louis instead, which was pretty late in the game to do that, but was lucky enough to find a good job in St. Louis. So we had kind of always wanted to come back. We liked what we liked the group of friends we were in St. Louis, and so we stayed for ended up being 10 years. But for the last 2 or 3 of those, I was looking for a job in Stillwater. I really wanted to come home. It's just, again, both of us grew up here. Her parents had still lived here. My parents kind of went. My dad took a job in Little Rock for a while and then ended up back in Edmond. And so, we were wanting to come home. It took a while to find something that was worthwhile. Mm-hmm. I had a bit of a career detour. The last 4 years we were in St. Louis, I worked in the law firm for about 4.5 years. Actually quit that job and went to seminary. So I went to Covenant Seminary in St. Louis for the last 3 years or so we were in St. Louis. I have all of the credits required to have a master's degree in exegetical theology, but never actually finished that thesis because we finally did find something and came back to Stillwater and kind of went a different direction. But really enjoyed my time doing that. And so when I found a position here at OSU in the business school at the Riata Center for Entrepreneurship, that's what brought us back in 2011.
Okay.
Is there anything you miss about St. Louis?
Oh gosh,
bigger city living.
Absolutely, yeah. For us, the thing we miss the most is our friends, and we still have a lot of good friends in St. Louis. We kind of had a group of friends that all had kids kind of at the same time, and so all of our kind of kids grew up together, and for 10 years. My oldest son was 6 when we moved back, but that was
foundational
great relationships in St. Louis. But also with young kids, St. Louis is a fantastic place. It's got a wonderful zoo that's free. It's got a science museum, science center that's free. It's got, Forest Park, which rivals Central Park in terms of size and things to do. Mm-hmm. The art museum, the municipal theater that's outdoor. There's all kinds of cool stuff in St. Louis, and certainly with a young family, it was wonderful. And that was one of the biggest sort of trepidations in moving back to Stillwater with 4 kids under 6 was, what are we going to do? And so, yeah, we certainly miss, some of those amenities, the restaurants,
Did that kind of lead you to want to get involved with the Wondatorium and trying to provide those things here?
Absolutely. Yeah. Very much so. When we first moved back, again, 4 kids under 6, the Wondatorium had just opened, I think was within its first year or so of opening. Mm-hmm. We spent a lot of time at the Wondatorium, and it was one of those things that was sort of like, okay, for people like me, and for my family, this kind of a place is incredibly important for this community, right? If we're going to attract young families, if we're going to bring in, young professionals, people who want to live in Stillwater, we need to have these type of amenities. And so that got me kind of involved in that board and what can I do to help out here, and how can I try to make sure this place sticks around, which unfortunately it hasn't, but certainly not for lack of trying on a lot of people's parts. And so that's kind of what got me involved.
It seems like almost then you coming back to Stillwater that maybe you already had a mindset of, I'm going to go back and I'm going to try to contribute in some way.
Absolutely. I grew up, I was raised to help out where I could help out, right? I mean, my dad was a deacon at University Heights. My parents kind of were always involved in different sorts of service activities, right? I mean, it was just sort of part of the way I was raised, that if you have something to contribute, you should contribute it, right? If you're concerned about an issue, you should find a way to help. Mm-hmm. And so, I was engaged in St. Louis when I was on the local YMCA board where we lived in St. Louis. I was actively engaged in our church as an elder, and did a lot of things when we were there. So there was no question that I was going to do something to be engaged when we came back to Stillwater, and those kinds of things that were important to my family were sort of the first place that we looked.
Makes sense.
It's interesting because, I mean, there's so much emphasis in Stillwater on the need to develop amenities and systems and infrastructure that will be attractive to young families and will keep young professionals here. Mm-hmm. And you guys are kind of, perfect examples of that, right? People who grew up here, wanted to come back, and then it took a while to find the job that would bring you back, first of all. So that's where your economic development comes in. Mm-hmm. And then things for your family to do after you get here.
Yep.
I mean, talk to me a little bit about some of the struggles mm-hmm. with that, and I guess how that impacts your view of where the city needs to go.
Yeah, it's a huge part of it, right? It's a huge part of why I ended up getting involved in city government and sort of the larger municipal issues after kind of starting out with Wondertorium and being engaged in those types of activities. I looked for a long time to find a job in Stillwater. I was a practicing attorney. When I was in seminary, I worked for a dispute resolution ministry. I actually worked with churches and worked with individuals on dispute resolution issues, and I kind of was a lawyer for them and a mediator. And I knew I wasn't going to do that. Like I went to seminary thinking maybe vocational ministry is something that I want to do, and very quickly figured out that it wasn't going to be something that I did as a job. And so, looking for professional attorney type roles, it's pretty difficult to find something in Stillwater that's not, it's difficult to find something in Stillwater at all, right? I mean, so I talked to local attorneys about, coming in and being part of small local firms, or potentially coming in to take over, some of the local firms, the way that, older folks that have been here practicing for a long time try to get involved and potentially take over firms. But, the questions I asked when I came and did that was, do I have to do divorces? Do I have to do DUIs? Do I have to, I didn't want to do that type of work. I just, I'd spent enough time doing family mediations and that sort of thing to know that I did not want to try to make a living doing that. It's too, just doesn't fit for me. And the response I got back from most of those folks was, well, you kind of got to pick up what you can pick up. If you want to make a living doing this in a smaller town, you got to kind of take the business as it comes until eventually maybe you can establish yourself as someone who just does business law or, that sort of thing. So I wasn't super interested in doing that. Then you've got the university, mm-hmm. And there's not a whole lot of lawyer specific jobs that they're hiring for at any given moment. So it took a while. And that was a big part of once we got back, I think there are a lot of people like me who would like to be in Stillwater, who were here for college or grew up here or whatever, who would love to be here if the opportunities were here for them to work.
Mm-hmm. And you wound up at a company that basically does software, but I mean, they're based here in Stillwater, mm-hmm. but they have it's an international business.
Yeah. So my day job now is at InnoWorks. I was at the university for a year. I moved over to InnoWorks. Bayfar Jahanshahi, who owns the business, was a friend of mine in high school. We kind of grew up together. He's a couple years older than me, but we played high school soccer together. I knew he had like a computer business. I thought he was just sort of fixing computers for people.
And he was like, set up your Wi-Fi, fix your computer.
He
like
was.
Doing
We still do
anything.
that. Yeah. But I sat down with him. I actually ran into him at a Riata Center event because he was speaking to college entrepreneurs because he started that business as a college student. And he was talking about how, we're getting ready to open an office in London, and we just signed Facebook as a client. And I was like, oh, so you're not just fixing people's laptops here in Stillwater. And so, I ended up moving over there. Now work as basically general counsel. I do all the legal work, and we have about 250 employees spread from Berlin to Singapore. Most of those are here in the U.S., 50 or so in Stillwater, and another 40 or so in Oklahoma offices in Oklahoma City and Tulsa. And then the rest of those folks are kind of spread out around the country, and then in 3 or 4 international offices now.
Okay.
When you decided to run for city, city council, were you appointed or did you have to run?
I ran for that.
You ran. Okay.
I initially applied in 2015 when Gina Noble was elected mayor and her seat opened up.
Okay.
Elaine Zanotti actually was appointed out of that group, which was the right decision from the council at the time. But Joe Weaver afterwards told me, he's like, hey, my seat's going to be open next year. I think you should run for it. So I ran for his seat in 2016.
So you talk to your boss and be like, hey, I might need to be a little bit more freely available to go to these meetings or, possibly show up for a podcast at, 9:30 in the morning. How does that work out with kind of the balance of work and then public service and then even family too?
Yeah. It's a challenge, I guess, is the short answer. I did speak to Bayfar and to the folks at Interworks when I first got involved and was going to apply for city council and asked, hey, how do you guys feel about this? What do you think, from a time commitment? Not really sure what it's going to look like.
Yeah.
But, I think the good thing about Interworks and the people there is that it's a very community focused sort of a place, right? I mean, they do a lot of community work, sponsor things, active all over the place. And Bayfar is, as a Stillwater kid, grew up here, has kept a business here that really has no business being based in Stillwater. Most of our, most of our clients at this point are not based in Stillwater. We do have a lot of local companies and a lot of local clients, but, a lot of our work is now on the coast or international and that sort of thing. And so it would be very easy to pick this business up and move it to certainly a bigger city, if not, San Francisco or New York or someplace like that. So, but he's invested here, right? And he sees the value of this community and wants his business here and wants to raise his family here. And so, that's been a huge benefit and blessing really to me to be able to say, hey, this is how I think I can contribute, and for him to see that as a valuable avenue as well, and be able to be flexible with timing and recognize that sometimes I'm going to be out doing city council or mayor things. And so from a family perspective, it's a challenge. We have 4 kids. They're now 10 and up, between 10 and 16. My wife had stayed at home as a mom up until the last couple of years. She's gone back to work a couple days a week at the high school as a speech pathologist. But we've always been busy. We've always kind of had things going on since we had our kids. We've both been active. I mean, she's on the YMCA board. She's been involved in extracurricular activities since we've been together, since we've had kids. And so we've kind of always just figured out how to work our schedules around what needs to happen. Hey, I've got to go to this meeting. Can you come watch the kids? Or, hey, can you take somebody to soccer tonight? Because I've got to go do this. So it requires a lot of communication. It requires a shared Google Calendar. It requires, a fair amount of juggling. And sometimes we both look at each other and go, oh, I was supposed to be at this interview thing at 9:30 or, whatever it is. I mean,
it happens.
It's hectic for sure. But I think it's just a matter of, when you have people who value the service and who feel like it's important to do these things, and they recognize it's not just, this isn't something that we do just for fun or to make some economic benefit out of it. It's stuff that we invest in because we care about it. And when you care about something, you make time for it.
Okay, so speaking of making time for things and speaking of fun, I've got a note here that says hobbies/interests.
Oh boy.
Okay, do you have any time for hobbies or interests outside of everything else you do?
If it's just me and I don't have anything else going on, I'm going to sit down and read a book, right? I mean, that's like, if I'm trying to think, the last time Rochelle and I just went on a vacation together to a beach somewhere, I think I just sat and read like 4 books, like on the beach. That's what I would probably choose to do on my own. I enjoy watching sports. I follow English soccer. That's kind of one of my oddities.
So are you a Cardinals fan? Is that right?
So actually, I mentioned before, my mom's from New Hampshire. My family,
Okay.
my extended family's from New England. My dad is not really a sports fan, so I got all of my sports fandom from my New England family.
Oh, okay.
So I actually grew up as a Red Sox and
Red Sox, that's right.
Patriots and Celtics, and that was kind of the influence I had. Now, my
Okay.
grandfather, who lived in New Hampshire and was, a Red Sox fan his entire life, he would send me, because we lived, here in Oklahoma, he would send me every year the Cardinals baseball cards set, the team set of Cardinals baseball cards, because he would say, you don't want to be a Red Sox fan. This is not any kind of life for anybody that wants to ever be successful.
It's too
And so
painful.
don't do it. Root for the Cardinals. They're closer to you. They're good. And so I kind of followed the Cardinals even as a kid. But yeah, my grandfather always tried to convince me not to be a Red Sox fan and to follow the Cardinals instead.
Ah, man.
And I was a Cardinals season ticket holder when I was in St. Louis. It was fantastic. I mean, that was my office my first job. My office was literally in the big mirror building that you see behind Busch Stadium, new Busch Stadium. I could sit at my desk and see home plate. It
That
was
is cool.
unbelievable. It was,
So
as a
did you-
baseball fan, it was awesome.
In part 2, we hear about Will's love for books and how being an English major who studied film impacts how he enjoys movies. Thanks again to Work It for sponsoring this series. For more information about Studio Stillwater and how you can help support our mission as a listener or sponsor, go to studiostillwater.net. There you can sign up for emails, get a free sticker, or send us a message. Thanks again for listening. Until next time.